Hello, everyone. It's me, William McQueen, and welcome to another installment of Stories for a Moonlit Night. Today, I'm going to be doing part one of The Christmas Coin, which is actually a story I've already done, filmed, and posted on YouTube back in December of 2017. But for some strange reason, YouTube seems to have lost it, and I don't know why. But here I am. I'm going to repeat it. Now, it is no longer Christmas, it's actually April in 2018 here in Arizona, in the 90s outside. But for today, it's going to be Christmas. So, welcome to part one of The Christmas Coin. Hello, everyone. It's me, William McQueen, and today's Stories for a Moonlit Night is a Christmas tale dealing with what happens when a homeless man steals one-of-a-kind coin and he gets the uneasy feeling that his life will never be the same again. It was cold by the fire, and Joseph Evans wondered how could he be that cold while standing that close to a fire. It had been colder than he had remembered in all the years he lived in the city of Autumnwood Falls, and there, in the homeless camp under the overpass, where the stars sparkled brightly in the fairly clear sky, and he stood close to the 50-gallon drum filled with whatever trash he could find and lit it on fire for warmth. But it didn't seem to warm him this evening. He looked down at his 11-year-old daughter, Veronica, who was sleeping all bundled up against a piece of concrete that she had hoped would shield her from the icy breeze that blew that evening. And Joseph, he felt bad. Here it was, the 21st of December, and he had nothing, not even a home to give his little girl. His wife had died some years earlier, and ever since then his life had gone downhill steadily ever since, losing his job, losing his home, losing everything, and he'll be damned if he's going to lose his daughter. So there he was, standing under that overpass where others had their own 50-gallon drums filled with whatever trash they could find and lit those on fire for warmth as well. Off in the distance a bit, he could hear a couple arguing about what he couldn't tell, but arguments were common amongst the homeless. Joseph kept to himself mostly. After all, his demons were all internal. He felt guilty and more than responsible for the predicament he found himself in, and he didn't have any idea how to get himself out of this. He knew his daughter deserved more, but he didn't know how to give her what she deserved. Oftentimes in the daylight hours, Joseph would take his daughter to Our Lady of the Assumption Catholic Church, where Monsignor Mulcahy would care for her while he went out and looked for work. At least when Veronica was at the church, he knew she would get a hot meal and sometimes even a warm bed. That made him feel a little better. Meanwhile, he would go around from place to place, being turned down for one job or another. He learned to stay away from the main street of Luke Meyer Avenue. They all got to know him there, the business owners and the police, because sometimes Joseph would take to stealing things to try and sell, to raise some money, to try and get a room for the night or some food for his daughter. He felt justified in his actions. He wasn't proud of it, but sometimes he would do what he felt was necessary just to survive. And he did it for his daughter, and that justified it in his mind. But the business owners and the police, even though they claimed to be sympathetic, their actions proved otherwise. So there he was, forced to scour the back alleys and the other not so nice neighborhoods and business areas for whatever work he could find, with mixed results. Sometimes he would raise a little bit of money and he would go to a local bar and get a little something just to take the chill of the winter air out of his weary soul. Joseph knew that his daughter loved him very, very much, and not once did she ever give any hint that she blamed him for anything, even their homeless situation, which he knew deep down in his heart was all his fault. But for the life of him, he couldn't figure out how to get themselves out of the situation. To Veronica, she always looked to the future with hope. She always had a smile on her face, and to her everything had a silver lining. She was more optimistic than he was, and he never let on how he felt. He always pretended to share in her optimism, even though he felt more and more dread every day, and he sank into a deeper and deeper depression. And on more than one occasion, he seriously thought about ending his own life. But he quickly snapped out of that for her sake, because he knew that if anything happened to him, that would just devastate her, and then she wouldn't have any hope for a future. So, the next morning, like they always do, they packed up their belongings and went to the local rescue mission for some breakfast, which consisted of a gruel-like hot oatmeal, some dried toast, some juice for her, and a cup of coffee for him. And then after that, they went out into the cold and began their day. He told his daughter that he was going to go look for work, so he took her back to Our Lady of the Assumption Church, spoke to Monsignor Mulcahy, and he was more than happy to put her up for the day, wished Joseph all the luck in the world, and offered to say some prayers on his behalf. Joseph thanked the clergyman, gave his daughter a quick kiss, told her to behave and do everything she was told, and then he went out into the cold to look for work. This is a story that he's repeated every single day for a while with limited success. But today he was thinking, well, this has to be the day. Christmas is right around the corner. And he had to do something for his daughter. He just had to. He didn't know what, but something had to be out there. Something. It just couldn't keep going on like this. So he was going out into the cold, through the snow, and once again, he was going to look for that elusive job that had to be out there. 3 hours passed, and once again he was turned down by every business owner and resident that he could find. Same story every single day. It appeared to him as though the people were getting tired of seeing him come around asking again for work over and over again. But he had to. He kept thinking maybe today's the day he could trim some trees, or clean someone's garage, or maybe he could go to a shop and sweep the floors, or go to a restaurant and wash dishes, bus tables, do something, take out the trash, something, even just for a few dollars. It's all he was asking. After all, he only had a few cents in his pocket, and that wasn't going to get him anywhere. So, deeper into the snow he went. He turned his collar up and trudged deeper into the snow, going further and further away from the center of the city, passing Lukemeyer Avenue, and now he's into the seedier parts of town, where it's more of the drug dealers and prostitutes and a lot more crime-ridden area. But then he saw something he had never seen before. Over there, off of McDowell Road, he saw a business he had never seen before. It was a bar, or so it seemed. It was all lit up and with brightly colored Christmas lights, and it just seemed to have a warm atmosphere about it, which thoroughly went against the surrounding area. So out of curiosity, he went closer to it, and there was this sign out in front, and the name of the business was called the Silver Snowflake. And just being near it gave him a warm and fuzzy feeling inside. So he looked inside the window and couldn't see much. He saw what looked like a Christmas tree and some patrons around. It appeared to be a bar of some sort, more like a tavern, like an old world tavern of some sort. But he doesn't remember seeing it, and he thought, okay, well, maybe they've got some work for him. So he goes inside. The jingle of a little bell alerted the bartender that a customer was coming in through the door. And Joseph looked around, and Christmas carols were playing softly through the very warm and comfortable air. And the patrons, he couldn't quite make it out, but they didn't look like they were from around here. They looked like they were probably from Holland or somewhere. He just couldn't place their dress or much about them. But suddenly, all conversation stopped, and everyone's attention focused solely on him. Feeling a little out of place, and he couldn't figure out why, he turned his collar up again and kicked the snow from his feet and walked closer to the bar. It was a nice bar, nice, heavy, dark wood. The whole place seemed to be carved from wood, give it sort of an old world look about it. And the attention to detail in every corner he could find gave the bar a very comfortable and welcoming feel. You don't see places like this anymore with that attention to detail. And he looked at the bottles of various alcoholic beverages lining the shelves behind the counter, and he couldn't quite make out what they were. They're in a language he couldn't quite make out. But, he wasn't sure what to do, so when the bartender suddenly came over with a towel and wiping out a glass, and the bartender was dressed very nicely with a bow tie and nice apron around his waist, he asked, "Hey, Joe, what can we do for you?" And Joseph was a little startled. He's like, "Well, how did you know my name was Joe?" The bartender smiled a little bit and says, "I just call everybody Joe. It's just my thing. But it is a coincidence, though. How you doing?" And Joe said, "Well, I've been better." The bartender asked, "What can we get for you?" And Joe just kind of looked around and just asked, "You wouldn't by any chance happen to have any work, would you? Something, I can sweep floors and, clean windows, wipe tables, do anything you want." The bartender shrugged and frowned a little and says, "No, I'm sorry, but there's not much to do around here, and I pretty much do all there is to do." And Joseph nodded his head, and, well, he says, "I had to try, Christmas and all." And so the bartender said, "So, can I get you anything? It's a little chilly outside." And Joseph said, "Well, I'd love to, but I just have a few cents." He pulled out what few coins he had in his pocket and laid them on the counter and said, "That's all I have." The bartender looked at the few coins and said, "Hey, what the heck? It's Christmas time. What can we get for you?" And Joseph thought for a second. He's like, "Hey, that's really nice. Thank you. I appreciate that." And while Joseph was about to tell the bartender what he wanted, the bartender stopped. He says, "Oh, wait a second. I've got just the thing for you." He pulls out this bottle from underneath the counter. It was a beautiful bottle with this really ornate label. It was dark glass, and you couldn't see the liquid inside. But the bartender, he poured Joseph a glass of this amber-colored liquid and slid it across the bar to him and says, "Here, try that." And Joseph, he looked at it, gave it a sniff, and it was pleasant. It was very, very pleasant, but he was unfamiliar with it. He asked, "What is that?" And the bartender, with a little smile, says, "That, my friend, is the proprietor's private reserve. Here, give it a shot." He says, it'll do wonders for you." So Joseph took it and gave it a sip, and it was really nice. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. It was like it was like sipping some of the best liquor he had ever had, but it had spices in it. It was like Christmas in a glass. So he downed it, and it was just the most wonderful thing in the world. And it just warmed him up and gave him the most wonderful feeling inside. And the bartender saw the look on Joe's face and poured him another glass. There you go. It's on the house. And Merry Christmas to you. And Joe, he picked up the glass and said, Merry Christmas. And before he could take a drink of that, he looked off to the side and off to the corner, elevated up near the top shelf of the bottles behind the bar, was a plaque about yay big. And in the center was a gold coin. But it was a coin the likes of which he had never seen before. It was emblazoned with the image of two reindeer that looked like they were leaping away from the center with some sort of a heraldic crest in the middle. And the way the light shone off of it, it was just remarkable. And it just drew his attention. Now he couldn't take his eyes off of it. And Joe asked, what is that? And the bartender kind of looked up. He said, oh, that, my friend, that is the Christmas coin. And Joe was confused. He says, what's the Christmas coin? And the bartender told him, well, legend has it that many years ago, here in Autumnwood Falls, on one Christmas Eve, Santa Claus was making his appointed rounds when he accidentally dropped that coin. Well, someone found it and found out that it changed his life. And now it belongs to me. And the legend has it that whoever possesses it, miraculous things happen in life-changing ways. And then And Joe looked at the bartender and says, you don't really believe that, do you? And the bartender says, I just put it up there. But it's a nice story nonetheless, don't you think? After all, everyone needs a little magic in their lives now and then. So the bartender said, hey, drink up and Merry Christmas. So the bartender, he took his glass and put it away and put the towel behind the counter. And then he grabbed a clipboard and went into this little room off to the side that looked like a storeroom filled with countless bottles of unknown liquors. And Joe, he sipped at the amber liquid in his glass, and he was fixated on that coin. He kept wondering, how much is something like that worth? After all, it looks like it's made of solid gold. And he thought, oh, the things that he could do for his daughter if he could sell that coin. And then a horrible, terrible thought crossed his mind. A thought that shamed him even as he was thinking about it. And he kept thinking he had to steal that coin. So he tried acting real casual and nonchalant so as to not attract attention to himself. And he slowly turned around in his bar stool and saw that people really weren't paying attention to him right now. And the bartender was still in the little room with his back to him, back to the door. So Joe kind of got up a little and pretended like he was looking at some old photographs, that were hanging nearby. And when he felt the coast was clear, he reached up, grabbed that coin, stuck it in his coat, under his arm and in his coat, and downed the liquor and tried to make it look as though everything was nice and normal. And then he turned to casually leave the bar. And as he passed the patrons, some patrons looked up at Joe. And the bartender leaned out the door and says, hey, Merry Christmas, Joe. Take care of yourself, all right? And come back anytime. And Joe says, thank you, appreciate it, Merry Christmas. And Joe went out the door with the tinkling of the little bell and once again found himself out into the cold. At that moment, the bartender stepped out of the little stockroom, looked off to the side of the bar, noticed that the coin was missing, and smiled and nodded, as though that was something that the bartender intended all along. Joe felt terrible. I mean, oh my gosh, what has he done? He stole again. He tried like crazy to trudge through the snow and get as far away from that place as possible before the police were called. He didn't know what he was going to do. I mean, after all, where was he going to sell that coin? It was one of a kind. Obviously, it would be hard to fence anywhere. But what's done is done. So he went back to Our Lady of the Assumption Church. By now, it was late in the day. So he went back to Our Lady of the Assumption Church, picked up his daughter, and they went back to the rescue mission and had their dinner for the night. And then they went back to the overpass where they spent their nights. And they made their little camp. As the evening wore on, his daughter knew there was something wrong, and she couldn't quite figure out what. She kept asking him, "Daddy, are you all right?" He's like, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it." Later on that night, after his daughter went to sleep, Joseph found himself looking up at the stars. There were a few clouds here and there, but still, once again, the stars sparkled brightly. And for a moment, it seemed like the worst had passed. And he didn't think about that coin for a little bit. Then he looked around, and he was wondering, where did everybody go? Everyone else that was there just a few minutes ago, all the other homeless people that lived by the overpass, they were all gone. The 50-gallon drums they were using for warmth were still burning, but there were no people. Joseph quickly looked over and saw that his daughter was still laying there asleep, but there was no one else around. But then he heard it. He heard a noise. It was a dragging, crunching sound. He had never heard that sound before, but it sounded like something was dragging in the snow. And then it got louder. Then it sounded as though many things were dragging in the snow. And he looked off into the darkness near the old abandoned field. That's where it sounded like it was coming from. There was no light in the area, so he couldn't see what was there. But the sound of dragging was getting closer and closer. And then, in the flickering firelight, he started to see vague shapes emerging. Things were coming closer and closer, and that crunching, dragging sound was starting to make him ill. Joseph didn't know what was going on, but instinctively he started getting closer to his daughter. If necessary, he had to protect her. He didn't know what happened to everyone else, but he didn't want anything bad to happen to her. And then, to his horror, he saw what was coming his way. Snowmen. Living snowmen. They were dragging themselves closer and closer. And some, he noticed, were just going about their business. There was actually a snowman walking a dog made of snow, leash and all. And it was very peculiar. Some snowmen were going about their business like human beings going around errands. But then a couple dozen snowmen seemed to be staring right at him, and they were coming closer and closer. And they didn't look pleasant based upon the expressions on their snowy faces. Finally, the mob of snowmen stopped about 20 feet away, but one snowman, right there in front, dragged himself closer. Joseph didn't like his look. That snowman looked like an unsavory sort of character, with a mean look and chomping on a cigar butt. The snowman took his twiggy hand from the tree limb that he used for an arm and pointed a gnarled finger at him and says, "You." Joseph didn't like the sound of the voice. It was like old leaves rustling in the wind and gravelly voice across snow. But Joseph, he responded. He's like, "Me?" Snowman says, "Yes, you. Come with me. Bring your daughter too." Now that did startle Joseph. He's like, "No, you leave her out of this. She has nothing to do with this." The snowman says, "You took the coin. You brought her into this yourself. Whatever happens, you have only yourself to blame." Joseph felt brave and stood up to the snowman and says, "No, I won't do it." The snowman got a little closer and says, "You have no choice. You made the decision to take the coin. Now you must face the consequences. Take your daughter and come with me now, or we'll force you." Joseph didn't like the sound of that at all. He didn't know how a snowman was able to force him to do anything, but deep down he knew it was in his best interests and the best interests of his daughter to do exactly as the snowman said. So Joseph leaned down and gently startled his daughter to wake her up, and she woke up and saw the snowman and was instantly awake and very much afraid. She's like, "Daddy, what's going on? What the?" And the dad says, it's okay, just relax, just get your things and let's go." And the daughter hesitantly got up and looking around and seeing the snowmen, some snowmen going around, men and women made of snow, doing ordinary things, like they were taking the place of the homeless people that were there, just conducting themselves like humans. But then there was the angry mob of snowmen that were looking at her and her father, and she knew that, well, she better do exactly what her dad said. She took her dad's hand and held it very close to him, and he took his daughter, and they followed the snowman. He says, "Follow me." And the snowman dragged himself through the snow again with that horrible, sickening, dragging, crunching sound. And the other snowman in the mob parted to let the snowman and Joseph and Veronica through. After the three of them walked on a little bit, the rest of the snowman followed in behind and made sure Joseph didn't chicken out and try to run away. And Joseph had a sense that somehow those snowmen could stop him if he tried to make a run for it. So, for now, he better do exactly as the snowman said. After about a good 15 minutes or so, Joseph realized that the snowman was leading him to someplace he didn't know where. It was deeper and deeper into a vacant field area that, to him, served no purpose. So what's out here? Why is the snowman leading him out here? Unless the snowman was planning on doing some harm to him and his daughter and leaving them there to die. Joseph was trying to think of ways of getting out of the situation. He was trying to think of where could he run, where could he go. But then he didn't know if there was any place to run to, if suddenly the world was repopulated with people made of snow. He didn't know how far this had gone on. He didn't know if the whole world was changed or just the area around them. There were too many unknowns. So for now, he felt it was best to just do whatever the snowman said. And after a while, the snowman suddenly stopped, took his twiggy arm, and pointed to a spot in midair and says, "Here. Put the key here." And Joseph was wondering, key? What key? I don't have a key. And the snowman chomped on his cigar butt and says, "Hey, buddy, the coin that you stole, that's the key. Take it and put it here." And the daughter was confused. "Daddy, coin? What coin? What do you mean he stole a coin? You stole a coin?" And the dad says, "Veronica, it's a long story. I'll tell you all about it later. Right now, let's just do what the nice snowman says." So he reaches into his coat and he pulls out the coin. Takes a deep breath, and he sees where the snowman's finger is pointing, and he puts it there, when suddenly Joseph felt as though the coin, even though it's in mid-air, felt like it came into contact with a solid object. But there was no object there. It was just dead air. But as Joseph removed his hand from the coin just hung there in midair. And the coin suddenly started to glow. And a line started to form in midair, going from the ground up to a certain point, and then doors opened. Doors of light opened into a world beyond this one. And beyond it, past this world of snow and cold, lay a world of warmth and green grass. And the snowman says, "You must go through there and take your daughter with you." Joseph asked, What is there? What is that place?" And the snowman chomped on his cigar butt and says, "That is where you're going to make your choice. And that is where your future lies, good or bad. Whatever you decide is in there." Veronica looked up at her dad, clutching his hand and arm more tightly than before, and said, "Daddy, I'm scared." And he looked down at her and tried to look as reassuring as possible and said, "I'm scared too, honey. But I did steal that coin, and I guess I have to face the consequences. So let's see what's on the other side." So the two of them took a deep breath and stepped beyond the threshold of their world into the world beyond. Once over the threshold into the other world, Joseph noticed that it wasn't so bad here. The weather was warm. There was the smell of some sort of flowers wafting through the gentle breeze. There was green grass. There were some sort of birds flying overhead. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but they looked familiar in an unearthly sort of way. And he turned around to see if the snowmen were following him when he noticed that the doorway to his world was gone. So for better or worse, whatever lay ahead, there was no going back. Veronica's worries seemed to go away the instant she was there. There was some sort of creatures, little fuzzy little creatures. They weren't rabbits, they weren't squirrels, they weren't anything identifiable, but they seemed pleasant and playful. And there were people walking around here and there, going about whatever business they were doing, but they weren't human. There was something distinctly not human about every single one of them. But they went about their business, and they didn't seem to pay Joseph and Veronica any particular attention, as though seeing humans in their world was an everyday occurrence. And off in the distance was a city, a gleaming city of crystal. And it reached into the sky in a magnificent way. And it seemed to make Joseph happy, but he couldn't understand why. All of this seemed vaguely familiar to him. And Joseph decided that he was going to enjoy himself for the time being. I mean, after all, if this was punishment for stealing a coin, then he's willing to take the consequences. And as they started walking around, Veronica and Joseph did, they were about to pick some fruit from a tree when a voice, a gentle woman's voice, spoke to them from somewhere behind and welcomed Joseph and Veronica to Idwich. And Joseph turned around and he saw a beautiful woman, not human, but she was about 8 feet tall, looking down at him with glowing robes and a gentle face. And he asked, "Pardon me, madam, but who might you be?" And she says, "I am D'Angelique. I will be your guide." He's a guide to what? To where? And she says, "To your destiny, of course. All of this is for your benefit. You stole the coin, and now you must make a choice. Now, please come with me. They're expecting you." So Joseph, he wasn't sure what to do, but he decided to follow D'Angelique as she led him towards the gleaming city. He says, "Idwich, you say?" She says, "Idwich." Veronica seemed to enjoy being in D'Angelique's company, and she made a comment to the woman and said, "You're pretty." And D'Angelique looked back and smiled warmly at the child. And then D'Angelique looked at Joseph and says, "You have a lovely daughter, sir. It would be a shame if something bad were to happen to her." That made Joseph uncomfortable, and he says, "What do you mean? What could happen to her?" And D'Angelique suddenly became serious and said, Well, whatever you decide, Joseph, is going to affect her future and your own. Like I said, it would be a shame if something were to happen to her. At that moment, the sound of wolves could be heard howling in the distance. There were woods off to the side, dark woods, scary woods. He didn't notice them a little while ago, but there they were. He could have sworn he saw eyes peering at him from the shadows. And he asked, "What is that sound? It's a scary sound. What is that?" And Angelique stopped, turned, and looked at him right in the eye and says, "Why, Joseph, that is you. That is the sound of your true self. The question is, what side of you is going to win? The good or the bad? The light or the dark? And whatever you decide, Joseph, will decide whether or not your daughter lives or whether she dies. The choice is left to you." To be continued in part 2 of The Christmas Coin, which, by the way, is already on YouTube. Has been since last year. It is April here in Arizona, but for now, Merry Christmas. It's been a pleasure doing this, and please subscribe to this channel, and if you like this video, please like below, comment below, please. I'm always curious to know what people think. Thank you so much, and you have a pleasant day and a pleasant rest of your year.